Ladies and gentlemen, the Middle East situation is deteriorating terribly, and the US inflation has turned out to be quite bad. But amidst all this chaos, I actually found some very good news, and I wanted to share with you. So please watch till the end to know what the good news is. Let's watch on, shall we? So the title of my talk today is I found the good news in this whole chaos of Middle East war and rising inflation. And this is a very interesting analysis. And I would like to share with everybody and happy to have your comments. So a quick update on Middle East first, because the situation is indeed worsening. So just to recall, the US and Israel launched war against Iran early February, and they've been going on and off. But more importantly, 2 days ago, an Apache helicopter from US has been shot down, and the US blame Iran for it. And there is some interesting story behind this. And finally, right now, for this last 24 hours, attack is now happening on both sides. So this is where it happens. This is the timeline. It all started in February. Both US and Israel launched an attack on Iran. And after firing for 2 months, a Pakistani-led mediation have resulted in a ceasefire. And on the 13th of April, the US decided to enforce a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. And now we have a blockade on a blockade. And all this was still going on with little minor skirmishes in the month of May. But just a few days ago, 7 to 8 of June, both sides hit each other pretty badly because Iran has blamed Israel for attacking Lebanon non-stop. So this is where it is. Now, the big event was the Apache helicopter being shot down. So first of all, and the US Apache helicopter was being shot down near Oman, and it went down the water. A sea drone came and rescued the two pilots. But the funny thing is this: Donald Trump said that the Iranians shot it down. And SATCOM, which is the military arm of that's handling the whole situation in US, said that the cause is still under investigation. And there was a official that said that the helicopter collided with an Iranian drone. Collided. Now, I don't know what the hell collided means. Does it mean that both were flying, not looking at each other, and they hit each other? Because the Iranians deny any air operation in the area. So now the Iranians are very proud military organization. If they can shoot down an Apache, they will be very happy to declare that they have shot down an Apache, but they didn't. So there may be something there. We're not too sure what causes it. Now, regardless, US blame Iran for it. And of course, an all-out multiple wave attack was ordered by President Donald Trump. And they attacked many areas, many targets, military targets, as they claim, in Iran. But interestingly, this information was just released by the Iranians that infrastructure from telecommunication and water were being damaged, affecting drinking water for 20,000 people. Now, the US did not publicly confirm that civilian targets were being targeted and damaged, but that's what the Iranians said. Of course, we all know this. The Iranians strike back, hit Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, and they fired a lot of missiles and drones towards them. Well, none were successful, and all were shot down by interceptors. Now, the key thing is this, that they even reached towards Jordan, which is actually quite far away, nearing to Israel. Now, this is a very interesting maritime escalation. MT Setter Bellow, which is a Palau flag, not Iranian, not US, or any other country that are for or against any of the parties. But the US force struck down a tanker with precision munition. So they attacked and hit a tanker, and SATCOM actually said that it carries Iranian oil. So the US said that this tanker is targeted because they're carrying Iranian oil. and did not comply with the US blockade instruction. Now, you may not know, but many of these carriers, they carry a flag, but in this case, the carrier was run by Indian crew. So of the 24 Indian crew, 21 were rescued, 3 died. Of course, who got angry? India got angry. India condemned US for it and summoned the US diplomat in New Delhi. So this is something quite disturbing that civilians were being hit and killed right now. Meanwhile, today, 11th of June, the US commenced another round of attack on Iran. So this time around, they fired a lot of bombs, missiles, and everything at Iranian targets for 4 hours. So military, surveillance, communication, air defense, location all over Tehran, and they were being hit, and including Iranian cargo ships were being hit as well. Well, the Iranians are not going to sit there doing nothing. So they launched a second wave of missiles and drones against Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. And they claim that they hit 18 to 21 targets, including aircraft shelters. So Jordan's side said that they intercepted 20 missiles. Kuwait temporarily closed the airspace, and Bahrain said that the debris actually caused some fire. An 11-year-old girl was slightly injured. So the Iranian claim of destroyed aircraft and major airbase were unconfirmed. Now the Iranians did something more drastic. They declared that the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. To my surprise, because I thought the Strait of Hormuz was closed. But I think what he's trying to say is that actually before that, if you pay me, I'll let some go through. But now you pay me, I also don't let you go through. I think that's what he says. So they issue a formal statement says that the Straits of Hormuz is closed until further notice and attribute it and put the blame on the US. But the SATCOM actually surveyed Maritime radar and said that, still got commercial vessels being allowed to go through. So what are they talking about? Well, my guess is these are ships already paid. So I think the Iranians said, okay, those that paid, let you go through. Those that haven't paid, you pay also no use now. This is my guess, okay? But I think that's probably the case. Now, this is where I want to tell you something interesting. Despite all this chaos, you look at the oil prices. It's been very stable, and stably, I'm not saying it's gone back to where it was, but it hovers around $85 to $90 despite all this escalation. Now, this is a very important thing later on the topic of inflation. Now, as we digress to inflation, the US inflation report came out, and in the month of May, the US inflation surged to a 3-year high at 4.2%. And this is the highest level since 2023. And this marked 3 consecutive months of acceleration and likely have more. And this increase in inflation rate is clearly attributed to the Middle East war, because if you look at the components, it was oil prices that gone up quite a lot. And of course, the stock market have a negative reaction. They sold it off because interest rates could possibly go higher or at least stay high for longer. So as I said earlier, the inflation rise was largely caused by energy prices alone, because it contributed to 60% of the CPI price increase. And this was primarily an energy shock, and we all expected that. But if you were to look at the CPI, taking away the energy component, actually the core CPI, which exclude food and energy, actually was below market expectation. It was at 2.9% and a monthly gain of 0.2%. It is considered stable and reasonably low. And this is a measure that the Federal Reserve tend to look at it more, because the rest of it go up and down quite a lot. Now, this is also where I want to include that Donald Trump actually irritated a lot of people. He said, I love inflation. But what he's trying to say is that this high inflation will eventually come down the minute the war stops. Well, I'm not against what he said. It's true, if the war stops, the inflation rate will come down, but the war is not stopping. But this is where I want to tell you a very interesting insight that I could actually attribute it to a good news. Now, I've said it before in 2022 when we made a hell of money by identifying this particular point, but I want to emphasize it again. Inflation rate measures the change in prices, not prices itself. So it does not measure prices, it measures the change in prices. So if the jump is a one-off jump, that means the oil prices jump up and stay there, yes, there'll be inflation, but you'll come down because inflation rate measures the change. So when the inflation rate goes higher, if the oil prices keep going higher, higher, and higher, that will cause inflation rate to go up. But we're not seeing that right now. In fact, we're seeing oil prices kind of coming down from its peak and staying where they are despite an escalation of Middle East war situation. So what am I alluding to? Well, oil market is showing signs of stability right now, even with the current situation. And this is where I think inflation is going to stabilize, which means it's unlikely to be a serious inflation. So there are two cases. One is the bear case, one is the base case. So if inflation stabilizes at the current level right now, then what we're saying is that core inflation, which exclude energy and food prices, will stay contained, and the inflation problem will not be serious. In fact, this is what JP Morgan says. So JP Morgan says that the inflation problem is likely to be temporary. Although the way they say it, my way I say it, the insight probably come from two different angles, but it doesn't matter. So while inflation has risen, it is likely to come down or at least stabilize. It's unlikely to go up any higher. And as for the bear case, there will be a case where if the Middle East escalate severely, they not just block the Straits of Hormuz, they also block the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, weapons and missiles and rockets flying everywhere, bomb up all infrastructure, then that's a different situation. So the conclusion I want to drive to everybody is this. The higher prices that we're all seeing right now, the inflation, is a foregone conclusion. It already happened. But high prices does not equals to high inflation. Okay, you got to get that correct. High prices, as long as it doesn't go higher, inflation will come down. So the market crash that Tom Lee is predicting that will come between now to end of the year is likely to come from other factors and not inflation. So we should put our focus on other areas, but at least from the inflation point of view, there's some sliver of good news here. Let's monitor this situation very closely. I apologize again for my bad throat, but I'll see you guys hopefully in the live stream. Okay. All right. Thank you and goodbye.